there, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Shooting the Breeze with Ben and Matt. I'm your friendly neighborhood soda, Matt, and this is my friend Ben Hot Take Rayner. Today we are joined by the one and only Alex Shawshank. How are you doing, Alex?
It's Shashek, actually.
Sorry, I just got on board. I'm a little brain dead right now.
Oh no, it's actually kind of that has been suggested as like a Halloween. That should be my next like Halloween themed Twitter name, Alex Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, perfect.
Mm-hmm. That was like one of the recommended ones, but I get called that throughout the year anyway.
Yeah, no, I hear you. For me, like the way my last name is spelled, people think it's Magoo. So it's Mageau. So I get Mr. Magoo all the time, and I'm like, I'm not blind, people. Come on.
That's fair.
Yeah. So with it being the first day of October and us being, I guess, 31 days of Halloween, we figured we'd talk about some horror thrillers today. So, Alex, what is it that actually brought you towards let me rephrase that. What helps you gravitate towards the horror genre?
Well, I am I don't want to say I'm a recent movie fan because that sounds like really weird because everyone grew up with movies. Everyone has had favorites movies from their childhood and everything. I mean, who doesn't? But I didn't really start actively watching movies that challenged me, actively watching movies that with genres that I, have never seen before until very, very recently, until the past maybe 2 years or so through Schmodown, becoming a fan with Schmodown. And I was like, hey, I've only heard of like a quarter of these movies. I got to up the ante. So I figure, and last year I was like more watching a lot of older movies, some classics and stuff. But this year I'm like, you know what? Let's dive into a genre that I have seen like maybe 15 movies total of. So might as well.
No kidding. And there definitely are a lot of great horror movies. Like me, I personally tend towards to go to the slasher genre personally, just because I like watching the kills. I like watching the effects. I like learning how they're all made in that. So I'm a big fan of Friday the 13th, big fan of the Nightmare on Elm Street series and what have you. What subgenre of horror is what do you gravitate more towards?
I was talking to a friend of mine about like there's 1,000,001 different subgenres of horror: monster movies, slasher thrillers, detective horror. Like Spiral coming up is 100% a detective horror. I consider David Fincher's Seven to be a horror movie. Honestly, it's a detective horror movie, like 100% a detective horror movie. I was like fighting with him over like the definition of a horror movie, and I was like, is the motive of the movie not to scare you? Are you kidding? So it comes down to that actually listed out like a bunch of categories. I'm putting together questions for a horror exhibition match, and so here are like a bunch of lists I have classic horror movies, so prior to 70s. We can go by decades: 70s, 80s, 90s. Horror reboots and remakes, franchises. Social horror movies. So you can talk about Get Out. You can talk about what is that movie from? Stepford Wives. Stepford Wives. You can talk about Wicker Man. Monster movies, Stephen King adaptations, major horror franchises, slasher, sci-fi horror. That Dark Skies, one of my favorite sci-fi horror, alien movies, family horror. So you can talk about like Addams Family, things like that, Monster House, Frankenweenie, torture porn, obviously, witch movies, but also that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be horror movies, but also scores and soundtracks. So there's so many iconic themes within the horror genre that are wonderful.
Hands down the most iconic being John Carpenter's Halloween theme.
Absolutely. It's completely, even if you don't know the movie, you know the soundtrack.
Oh, for sure.
You know that score. You know those themes. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I can even argue Friday the 13th. Sorry, go ahead, Ben.
How about Willy Wonka? Would that be considered a horror movie?
Willy Wonka? Oh.
Yeah.
The original. Okay. The original. Ben, I have to tell you, 100% that movie scared the shit out of me when I was a kid. I remember watching that movie when I was like very, very young, and that movie, till this day, I have a hard time watching it because it's like downright creepy in so many respects. I didn't like, I was like, Willy Wonka, he's definitely a creepy guy. He's actively like low key trying to poison these kids to kill them in this like weird torture chamber, aka the Willy Wonka candy factory. You know, people are actively dying while he's trying to search for this kid, find the right golden ticket kid. That the Oompa Loompas, where do the Oompa Loompas come from? I don't know. You know,
Yeah.
That but he's over like a really, and you can't forget his the guy that was like, he's trying to find the recipe for the everlasting gobstopper. There's that scene in like the alleyway shrouded by darkness.
The guy all in black.
Yeah, that I remember seeing that as a kid, and I remember being like, I don't like it. I don't like it.
See, what's funny is I remember I watched it a few times, and I went to Catholic school, and they showed it to us there, and I didn't get any of that until I was in my teens, and I was like, "This ain't right." No.
Nay.
Yeah, and they say Johnny Depp is the scary one. Ugh.
Yeah, no. I love me, Gene Wilder and everything. He's fantastic in everything he's in, but that one, there's just like I feel like there is low key, like when you're a kid, when you're watching it, I think there is an underlying creepiness to the nature of the story that you can, as a kid, you have a hard time verbalizing, but as an adult, you recognize it so fast. But when you're a kid, you're kind of, you don't really think about it. You're like, I just know that I'm uncomfortable. Yeah, but it's covered in candy, so it's
okay. Grandpa Joe's dancing, even though he can't work.
He's been completely bedridden for almost 30 years, and out of nowhere, he gets a golden ticket, and he's good to go. I'm sorry, what is this? Did he just decide, I don't want to work today, so I just want to be bedridden for the rest of my life?
Like who does that? Yeah. Money is everything.
Meanwhile, this single mom is like taking care of 4 adults and a child and she's doing pressing laundry and everything for a living. I don't like it.
Were there any other movies like that left an impression similar to that on you as a child?
Wizard of Oz.
Really?
That one scared the crap out of me.
Was it? Let me guess. The Witch.
No, nothing to do with the witch. The witch never bothered me at all. It was the monkeys and the flying monkeys, and also the trees, the apple trees.
Yeah.
They were like throws, like after she's like, oh, she's picking an apple, and suddenly they come to life, and they start they're like, get out of here, blah blah, and they start throwing apples and everything. And meanwhile, she's just hungry.
Yeah.
That creeped me out.
Ben has heard me tell this before, but for me, I have a lifelong fear of dolls because my mom let me watch Child's Play when I was 3. Yeah, all because we had the VHS tape, and I just remember having these nightmares for years of like Chucky trying to kill me in my sleep, me trying to escape, and then I turn a corner and he's right there, those sort of things. So finally, I was like 12, and I asked my mom, like, I've been having these nightmares for years. What's going on? And she said, well, when you were 3, you saw the VHS tape and you saw a doll on the cover. So you asked me to let you watch the movie with the doll. And she said she kept refusing until I finally, I guess I got her to the point where she'd had enough. Said, fine, you want to watch this movie? Here you go. So because of that, I have a lifelong fear of dolls like that. I can watch the movies, no problem, but you give me anywhere near the merchandise, you get me near any lifelike doll, I want nothing to do with it.
Did you ever see Poltergeist, the original Poltergeist?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, what do you think of that clown scene?
See, I got that one around when I graduated high school, so I was old enough to not be scared by it because of Child's Play. There was very few horror movies I watched as a child. Like I think the only other one I remember watching was a movie called Sometimes They Come Back Again with the late Alexis Arquette in it and Hilary Swank. That's the only other horror movie I remember watching as a child. Yeah,
that makes sense. I can see that.
There's one Disney movie that freaked me out as a kid. I never had Little Mermaid.
Oh, really? I was thinking Pinocchio.
Ursula.
Oh
yeah.
When he goes giant, that freaked me the heck out growing up.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you there. I mean, I think we definitely kind of dive into a lot of the origin stories behind some of these Disney stories. Pinocchio, oh my gosh. Pinocchio is a crazy story. Yeah, it's really great. A Little Mermaid. that is a legit horror story. I think it's like Danish or something.
Yeah,
where the origins are. Yes. But another one is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Yeah.
If we're gonna talk like that movie, I remember I remember seeing that movie for the first time when I was like 6 or something. And there is a scene like towards the beginning where the hunter is trying to get to her in the forest. And it's like shredded in darkness, and there's like neon green eyes and stuff. Like it, it's like really creepy. It's like a 3-minute scene, but I remember being absolutely terrified when I was really younger. And but I also know that I just remember being a kid and being completely freaked out at the prince. I was
really?
Yeah, because I was like, why is he trying to make out with her? She's dead.
That is creepy. What about Dumbo? Like that's another one for me. Like the acid trip elephant scene. You know what I'm talking about in Dumbo? Yeah.
I actually really liked Dumbo.
As a child, that scene was like, what's going on?
Well, one of my favorite movies that I would play on absolute repeat. I probably seen the movie like at least 30 or 40 times, minimum. At least when I was a kid, and I knew it like scene for scene, still do, is Fantasia. And Fantasia, there's a lot of darker elements, and it's really creepy. Like with the demon that's into the mountain, and there's like a lot of like weird dark moments, the dinosaurs, all that good stuff. But I do think that that a lot of those elements that are kind of psychedelic in nature, really, it's kind of similar to Dumbo. And I don't know why, but that kind of fantasy element made it easier for me. Knowing how psychedelic it was, it just kind of made it seem less real, I guess, by comparison. At least to a little 6-year-old me version.
Fair enough. Another one that really haunted me, and now you're probably around my age, so you might know the Boo Box from Hook.
Oh gosh!
Right. Every time I watched it, I hid under the covers until
really.
Oh yeah, it's just the thought of getting locked in a box with something that's going to eat you alive just scared the shit out of me.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's definitely like really creepy.
What was a man eating bugs? Now they flew in there.
What was a scorpion?
Yeah, it was scorpion. They dropped little scorpions in there.
And like
I never picked up on that, and I love that.
No, that was a scorpion, and like. I still will do this occasionally, but I was the kid that I would like try to hide as much of my body under the covers so like the monsters wouldn't see me. You ever done that? I think the Boo Box kind of helped with that. I was afraid of getting attacked by stuff.
Well, scorpions and bugs in general never really bothered me because I grew up eating bugs to a certain extent.
Okay.
I'm Thai, and my mom actually moved here. My mom actually moved to the U.S. when she was like 10, 11, 12 or so from Thailand, from a little bitty village in northern Thailand. And my grandma, she lives down in Texas, but she's made, they're like very traditional, delicious, Thai dishes that are almost entirely, insects. And so I haven't had scorpion, but I have had like cockroaches and things like that. And there's like some like crickets. Oh, crickets are so good. Oh. You got to know how to cook them. That's the thing.
Of course. You got to marinate them right and all that stuff. So I'm assuming you related very well to Timon and Pumbaa.
Well, no, actually not so much because slugs. I cannot do the slugs. The crunchiness and everything is good, but Timon and Pumbaa, they're cool and all. But the entire time I'm like, they're like, ooh, slimy and saucy. I'm like, that's not appetizing. Give me the crunch. Give me the snap. No. Mm-mm.
Yeah, no kidding. I don't know if I'd ever be able to stomach bugs. I freak out when a fly flies in my mouth when I'm driving.
That's fair. That's very fair.
Yeah. That's because I live in Western British Columbia, so we don't really have any of that stuff up here. We're about as white.
You're not going to the right restaurants in that case.
Oh, definitely not. Definitely not. I mean, different things are opening up here all the time, so who knows one day, right? Yeah. So, okay. So you said you come from a Thai background. Did you ever watch any like Thai horror movies or anything like that growing up? Have you ever seen anything like that?
Well, Thai films growing up were not a real big thing. And the thing is, I'm 30 years old, and so there wasn't really easy access to foreign films, obviously, at the time, at least growing up. Now there are. And, but
I'm 33, we're similar age, so I understand that.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, like, obviously now, if I have kids, I'm like, foreign cinema, bam, get ready.
Yeah.
Parasite, it's happening, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, no kidding.
But
let's introduce that to kids.
yeah. Oh man, the cake scene. Oh, gosh. Yeah, that's that. If we're gonna talk about horror scenes and not horrifying scenes and not a horror movie, yeah. But when it comes to like foreign cinema, I grew up watching some Asian shows. I watched more when I was younger, though. I was really into anime, and I watched some Korean. I still watch a lot of Korean movies and TV, but I would watch a lot of I would watch like Japanese horror movies quite a bit, especially in my preteens and early teens. That was probably some of my first introductions into horror, like true horror movies, outside of like detective stuff,
So, what were some of your favorite Japanese horror movies growing up? Like, because I'm actually not familiar with horror for the most part. So,
the movies that Ringu that inspired the Ring franchise.
Yeah.
I know I said I don't like body horror, but I actually really like a lot of the psychological horror aspects of Audition. That's another really great one. It's terrifying.
Audition. I'm assuming it's got to do with like plays and stuff like that.
Kind of. Okay, so it's about a man who's a widow. His wife died like 2 years prior, and so he's going through this audition process to find a potential new wife. Mm-hmm. And so the way he's getting these girls women to audition is that these girls think that they're auditioning for a TV show.
Oh,
they're not. It's not a huge reveal. It's like from the get-go. Thing is, we kind of learn a little bit by bit more about one contestant in particular. This girl, she's interesting, and you find out that she is a serial killer, but also she tortures her victims. She has like this big black bag. There's a long-standing shot in her living room. She covers it with like this tarp situation, and there's like this, and it's like a good 4-minute long scene of silence, and there's this black bag that's just sitting in like the middle. And out of nowhere, it just shuffles. It moves. And you're like, what the hell? And you find out it's a person. Person that's hidden. Yeah, and it's
like that once.
It's terrifying. Yeah, but you find out you find out she's been taking bits of pieces of this person bit by bit. She takes away his tongue, his limbs, his pieces of his face, and she's like wearing this whole leather situation, and and she like pukes into a jar and feeds it to him as food.
So does she like wear the body parts or
no? She doesn't. No, she's not eating him or anything. She just cuts him off for fun.
Okay, so I wrote that movie down, so I gotta watch that.
Audition. And it's not a huge giveaway. You find that out by halfway through it, okay. And she's one of the contestants. So it's like a matter of time before finding out the real reason behind these series of these TV auditions, and there's all this widower as well.
Okay,
so it's the whole thing.
Yeah, that's definitely a movie I want to watch this month. But no, I actually did a prank similar to the bag thing with some friends of mine at work. We had a big duffel bag, and we were like, "Oh, let's scare the cashiers." So we put my friend Richard in it, who's the guy coming on this weekend. And so we put it on there. We wheeled it on this big cart up to the front. We left it between the cashier stations right before we're closed. So I'm in the back doing my stuff, and about a few minutes later, I just hear on the radio, guys. The bag's moving. And all of a sudden you hear from the other side of the store just this loud scream because Richard had to pop out because he couldn't breathe anymore.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, we're jerks.
Yeah. I don't know. That's a guy thing. I don't know. Like when I'm with like my girlfriends, we don't do that. Yeah. We don't like to scare each other like outside of little things, but we never try to like pull like really scary pranks out on each other. But
Yeah, in hindsight, yes, it is funny, but it is also cruel because we did do it to someone who we know is easily scared. So I mean, yeah. So I mean, like, yeah. In hindsight, yes, it was a cruel joke, but it still makes us chuckle a little bit. It's even her; it makes her chuckle.
When I was in college, my friend's boyfriend, he did something to prank her.
Yeah.
The thing is, she didn't know, and he was wearing a mask though. And he started like chasing her. So she was like scared, and it was like a Halloween prank thing. She ended up breaking his nose.
Oh, I'm assuming they're not together anymore.
No, they're not. But she ended up breaking his nose because she got a bat and she like whacked him right in the face, having no clue, and had a mask on. And he ended up like trying to sue her or something. I don't know. It was a long time ago. But at the same time, she's like, "You wore a mask and you were coming at me in the dark."
Yeah, he had it coming.
I'm sorry. Should I not defend myself? And I was like, "Girl, you defend yourself, girl. You do it. You do what you need to do. Okay. If someone's out to get you, you kick their ass."
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I mean, he's got no grounds to sue her on that. That's just dumb. What do you expect was going to happen?
Yeah. Well, they're not together anymore, so.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I'm assuming the lawsuit had something to do with that.
Maybe.
Yeah. So, you said this is your first time jumping into like doing the horror month movies, right? So, is there any ones that you are in particular are excited to possibly watch that maybe you haven't seen, but it's generally most people have?
Yeah, absolutely. I will be watching Halloween.
The original? You've never seen the original, right?
No, I've never seen it. I've seen clips of it, but I've never seen the movie by itself. I'm also tonight, I'm going to be, after we get done with this, I'm going to be sitting down with my masama curry and diving into Blair Witch Project.
Oh,
God.
So that movie kind of kickstarted my dislike for found footage films.
That's fair. It's like found footage. I feel like there's found footage films can definitely they can do amazing things. That found footage, and I feel like especially now more than ever with how filmmakers and everything are experimenting with like on here through the computer screen. I can't remember what it's called, but it's a certain like a filming style to film through the computer screen like that. Like in the movie Searching, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can't remember his name, but that's only become huge in the past like 5-6 years or so. But I feel like it's definitely so much more useful for outside horror movies, but it definitely has a real bad rep, that's for sure. We really associate it with really bad movies, and justifiably so. Almost exclusively bad movies come from it.
Pretty much. It's not that I don't respect what they're doing. Is I don't know, something about the feel of it. It's like I don't want to watch 2 hours of security footage. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's not something I ever got into. And I remember like the whole hype around the Blair Witch at the time was like, oh, this really happened, blah, blah. And I'm watching this. I'm like, they're full of shit. I think it was like 14 when I saw it.
Yeah. My husband, he was telling me, I told him what movie that I picked for tonight, and he's like, yeah, I saw that in theaters. And I was like, that came out in like 1999 or 98, right? And he's like, yeah, I saw when I was like 7 or 8.
Holy shit.
And I was like, what? Oh,
that's not right.
And he's like, yeah.
Oh, that's not right.
I got through it. But I'm like, and I was like, I thought it's like Pinocchio is bad. But wow. No, but yeah, so it's definitely a genre that I feel like it's the marketing campaign. I remember studying the marketing campaign when I was in college because I went to school for communications.
Okay.
Because it was like one of the first really big marketing campaigns that really went viral because the internet was just coming out. Mm-hmm. They weren't really sure how to use it in terms of movie marketing, things like that. So it was like one of the first films to really experiment and really have like its own website that's still used, and things like that. So it's definitely kind of interesting how it's really exploded since
My
then.
aunt had this book on the Blair Witch. It was one of those making of books, but it was done as if as if it was written by people who were actually trying to find the people in the movie or whatever. And I read that before I watched the movie. I think that might have actually tainted my viewing of it a little bit, because I already knew what was going to happen, and being like, oh, this is bonkers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a very similar experience with that, reading the book The Mothman Prophecies.
Okay.
Prior to seeing the movie, and that just ruined the movie for me. I was so disappointed.
Yeah, no kidding.
I was like, Richard Gere, I'm gonna love it, because I love Primal Fear.
Oh yeah, that's the one with him and oh god, who's the other guy?
Edward Norton.
That's the one. Yes.
Laura Linney.
Yeah, it's a good movie. Yeah.
I love it. It's one of my personal top 10 courtroom dramas. So.
Oh, very nice.
But yeah, it's a pretty. I'm excited to see this movie after it's been such a long time, and everything's been spoiled, obviously. Yeah. I'm not going to be like pissed at anyone for spoiling the ending, like, obviously. Yeah. But at the same time, I don't really know any of the details about it, so it'll be fun.
You said you'd also hadn't seen Halloween. Now, it actually harkens back to what you just said, where a lot of people I found who've watched Halloween for the first time many years after it came out, they find it's too predictable, because a lot of the stuff that we see in that movie, you've seen other places. So yes. So are you afraid of maybe that happening for you when you're watching, like, say, Halloween or any other one of those type of movies?
I guess to a certain extent, it's just it's the very first. Like, I can't like Casablanca, for example. Am I going to look back am I going to watch Casablanca and be like, this movie is cliche, I've seen them all, because it ended up influencing so many movies after? Yeah. Like, I can definitely see the path that's going down, but at the same time, I would never, I personally don't like looking at a movie like that and being like, oh, it's so predictable or anything like that, because at the time when it was released in 71?
No, it was after that. It was, I believe, 76.
76? Yeah, but I mean, it was considered a huge deal at the time.
Because Halloween H2O was 1998, and that was 20 years after, so it was 78.
There you go. Yeah, it definitely created the future list of cliches that we know about today, for sure.
Yeah, and definitely a lot of bad ones.
Sure, yeah. But now we think of it as bad, but maybe it's different seeing the first one, though. Maybe it's not bad in the first one, though. I'll find out.
And and that's one of the things, like, a lot of them are pretty imaginative what he did in those movies. So you just mentioned a few moments ago that your husband, he saw Blair Witch at age 7 in the theaters. Was there a movie that you saw in theaters that maybe you were too young to see that you can recall? Because I know the first movie I snuck into that was an R movie was Ghost Ship in 2001.
Oh.
Yeah, they actually let me in without even carding me, and I was 13.
Honestly, no, not really. My family didn't really go to movie theaters all that often. If we went to a movie theater, we went to a theater that was on a military base. And on military bases, not all military bases have movie theaters, but some that do, they would only show like 1 or 2 movies. And usually they're like rom-coms or family films. They're that kind of thing, the big movies kind of thing.
Yeah, fair enough. That's actually what I have here. Is a 2-screen theater, because I'm 60-some-thousand people. It's still small towns. That's all we get is that type of stuff too.
Yeah, but me, it's that's one of the big reasons why I didn't see a lot of horror movies. I personally just didn't have access to them, and also neither one of my parents were really big into the horror genre as a whole. So it's definitely, again, I didn't grow up with a lot of this experience outside like I said, the only horror or thriller inspired ones were definitely more detective, noir, thrillers, maybe slashers here and there, but that's it. No true supernatural horror movies or anything.
Yeah.
How about the Sixth Sense? Did you see that?
I still haven't seen the Sixth Sense.
Sixth Sense, I never really thought of it as a horror. To me, it's like when I think of a horror movie, I think of the purpose of a horror movie is to scare its audience to a certain extent, right? It's to do that. Of a thriller, it's almost to like solve the problem. Like, well, in most things, but I mean, like in a slasher or thriller in that way, I feel like you're definitely, there's no real horrifying aspect of that movie. I don't consider a horror movie, even though it's all about ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't really consider it. I don't know. Maybe it is like low key a horror movie.
Why do you think people sometimes confuse the two? Because I find that some people think that thriller movies are horror movies and vice versa. Do you think there's a reason that people confuse them?
I think there's a real bias. For sure. I think there's a real bias. I got into an argument with someone about the definition, and because we both had a very different definition of horror and thrillers, and some people think there's a reason why horror movies and the genre in general does not do well with like award season.
Yeah.
Let's face it, people think to them, some critics at the time, and there's like this like bias being like, well, horror movies can't get awards. No real good horror movie. I mean, there's no such thing. And then Get Out wins like best original screenplay, things like that. So it's I feel like there's a real bias against the genre, just thinking that, oh, horror movies are like cheap. They're not artsy. They're not good. They're boring. They're predictable, and they're not meant to be good. Yeah,
and probably one of the bigger examples of what you just said is The Thing. Like, if you look at the reviews and stuff when that came out, it was panned. Everyone didn't like it. Didn't make any money. And look at it; it's considered one of the best movies ever made.
Arguably, I saw that for the first time the other day, and I really enjoyed it. I didn't love it the way some of my friends absolutely love it. Like, to them, it's like one of their favorite movies of all times. But I really, I see like the body horror that's, the Cronenberg-esque with the, it's definitely there. The practical effects were like really, really cool. But it, it was also like very, very, what was more scary to me was not so much the alien aspect, was more the isolation. That was more scary to me.
Yeah. Fun fact, I actually live 4 hours away from where they filmed the base stuff.
Really?
Yeah. It was filmed in Stewart, British Columbia, which is right on the border of Alaska. Yeah, I'm 4 hours away from that. So you can actually you can go up there into the glacier where they filmed it, and you can actually still find like little bits and pieces of stuff from the set. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Did you
feel like, was like what's his name, McReady's like leather jacket just casually hanging around or something? I
up there, but my friend who introduced it to me, that's one of our things, is one day we're gonna try to get up there and see it, because you got to get to Stewart, and then you got to go onto a glacier to get there. I
posted on Twitter, it was like a spoiler thread of like me watching it, and it's just like me being frustrated with everyone, because the entire time thinking, this is like bullshit science. What the fuck are they doing? They're heating up blood, and they're like tapping a wire thing, and therefore that determines who's an alien. And they're cutting people with this dull scalpel, and they're just wiping it on jeans and just cutting someone else. Are you kidding me? Cross-contamination. Hello.
I know, right? You're looking at the 2020 eyes and like, that's how you get lung disease.
Yeah. It's also, it was kind of weird, because when I saw that scene, I was reminded of it. I kept thinking about horror movies from the 80s that really kind of were supposed to be reflections of like the AIDS epidemic and things like that. And I was like, whoa. This is like, I think it came out like 81 or 82 or something. Yeah,
it was the same week as he.
And so I was wondering if that was a very conscious effort or not.
See, that's something I've seen the movie a lot. I never picked up on that until I had a conversation with my friend on his podcast. We were discussing the thing, and he brought up the AIDS epidemic, and it totally blew my mind, because I never put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah, it's kind of weird when you kind of put it in perspective like that. Like sometimes there are times where it is a very it's meant to be like very obvious. Like if you're watching Get Out, you're like, 100% very clearly a social thriller that's talking
Yeah.
about racism and systemic racism and things like that. You know, it's like very aggressive. It's like on the
It's on the
forefront
nose.
of the entire time. But sometimes, especially in movies like horror movies, where it can be already very difficult to get funding, things like that, a lot of times, you know, creators are told, hey, we don't want to include these really difficult themes to talk about. That's too risky. Let's take that out.
Yeah.
So doing like little subtle things like that can really are really some of the ways to include some of those themes that otherwise might have not been used, you know.
And do you think that's why people like enjoy horror movies? Because it's in some sense or another, they're confronted with what's going on in society.
Yeah, I will say I think movies in general are in and of itself political, consciously or not. You know, it's just the act of making a movie is political to me, and because it's all about sharing your opinions, whether it be for them, against them, on whatever topics it may be, and sometimes they're focused on and some of them are very focused on society or identity, whatever the situation is. But I think it's in terms of horror movies, 9 times out of 10, it is aggressively symbolic. If you want to talk about the Stepford Wives, obviously, it is an example of, it's like, you know, it's talking about feminism. It's the horror aspect. It's not so much, you know, the idea of being killed by a small town. It's the idea of this idea of everyone kind of coming together to be like, hey, you need to change. You're the worst. Women suck. And, you know, this idea of control, you know, the Wicker Man is, you know, also it's just talking about like the role of religion can play in a small town and also like, and the cop, he's horrible. I hate the cop. I would rather be hanging out in the village doing my thing. You know, I don't want to be on that cop side. I'd be on the village's side in that. So it's kind of a weird way to have commentary, you know, on these very, very difficult subjects that are put into a movie that are meant to be digestible, essentially.
Yeah, it's basically like, here's your serious message. Oh, we're going to distract you with this gory thing. Here's your message. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
What do you guys think of the movie A Quiet Place?
I loved it.
Quiet Place?
I loved it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. If we want to talk about some really deep themes, that movie is very aggressively political, but also it's a really great commentary talking about parenting parenting in horror movies. So parenting in horror movies is really kind of interesting because you can talk about Rosemary's Baby, The Babadook, The Quiet Place, The Omen, where it's all about parents being scared for or of their children, you know, and and the outside world that's trying to control you in your relationship. So it's definitely weird. I love Quiet Place though.
I watched
that's a good one
with all my friends, and 2 of them in there were first-time parents. Like their daughter was just born a few months prior, so it's definitely interesting watching it with new parents. And watching them get so freaked out of this movie, because I mean, I'm a single guy, I don't have kids, so it's not something that my mind goes towards, but it was definitely fascinating watching them viscerally react to this movie. My one friend almost didn't finish it. He almost walked out of the room.
John Krasinski, he didn't write the movie, but he directed the movie. It wasn't his directorial debut, but he only did like a handful of movies prior to that. But he's very vocal about the process of making the movie because he was in a very, very similar situation where he ended up reading the script for the first time only a few weeks after the birth of his second daughter. Yeah. And so he said reading the script was overwhelming for him. Like he was crying into the pages. It was like so very difficult, and the relationship and not to mention at the time he said like when he was reading the script he already envisioned himself and his wife in those roles, just because he just needed to put in some people in there. So it was so difficult for him to do. And they had to take a lot of breaks when filming.
Oh, I can only
20-minute break. Yeah.
It's a heavy film for sure.
I'm looking forward to a sequel whenever that comes out in this crazy.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I say I definitely really want to see it. I had some people argue with me that that movie is not a horror movie; it's a sci-fi thriller, and I'm like, what is wrong with you? There's alien monsters that are actively trying to kill you, and they're terrifying. They're just tearing you to shreds. That's 100% a horror movie.
Yeah, I'd put it in the psychological thriller horror movie because like the horror, the monsters are like pretty much messing with your psyche because you have to be quiet all this time, always looking over your shoulder. Like it's definitely a horror movie.
100%.
Well, I mean, can't you make that same argument for the fifth Alien movie?
Yeah, Alien is a psychological horror movie for sure.
Yeah, it's by the definition of Ridley Scott's definition, it's a haunted house movie set in space.
Yeah.
It is Ridley Scott. He defines it as he defines it as like as a sci-fi horror movie specifically, and it's arguably one of the best sci-fi horror movies. Now, as the sequels and everything, it changes. You know, I mean, like you talk about, it's more focusing on the action, adventure, or whatever it might be. But the first one, at its core, is a horror movie.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely. I was actually, while you were talking about that, I was just thinking like there are a lot of similarities between that and A Quiet Place. Like, I mean, you're basically isolated. You're being hunted by something you don't quite understand. You're always constantly looking over your shoulder. You don't know what's going to happen. Like, yeah, I can definitely see parallels between those two movies.
Mm-hmm. He mentioned that Ridley Scott. Who was it that he was talking about? Because I read in an interview that he compared it a lot to, like, he filmed it, I believe, right after he saw Halloween. And so he took a lot of cues from that movie. So I'm kind of like, and Alien is one of my favorite movies of all time. And so I am going to be kind of looking out for that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I never actually thought about that. Like just the similarities between those two movies. Did you ever? You a video gamer?
No, not really. Sorry.
Okay, so if you really want a good scare, play the Alien video game that came out a couple years ago, Alien Isolation. But play it with the sensor on, because if you make a noise in the real life, it will trigger the alien. Yes.
There is this game that I watched Lucas play years ago. I can't remember what it's called. It's very, very similar. They recommend you play it in the dark. And so it's very creepy. Where
it's not Dead Space, is it?
I don't know. It's a period film as well. Where like hopping on pieces of wood and things like that. You're trying to complete missions, but you can't make a sound essentially, because something's gonna kill you. But it was watching him, I love watching Lucas play games. I don't like playing games. Like I love watching him play like Zero Dawn Horizon and Red Dead Redemption and all that. But this game, I was like, F that. Nope, I can't. No.
My friend had a similar reaction to the game I just mentioned, Dead Space, which is kind of like got an alien vibe where it's like you're in space on a wrecked spaceship trying to work your way around. And yeah, she was having the same reactions. Like, no, I'm out. I can't do this.
Yeah, I know my limits.
Yeah,
I'm not doing it. I like it.
Are you gonna, during your watch this month, are you gonna be watching like what are considered like classic horror movies like Universal Monsters? Like, I don't know if you've ever seen any of those or anything from like the Hammer films or anything.
I don't know what the Hammer films are. What are they?
So the Hammer films is essentially is a set of British horror movies that were made from the 50s to the 70s. So that's where audience got to know actors like Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee and guys like that we know from like big science fiction movies. And they took like Frankenstein and they took Dracula and they took the Mummy, like the Universal horror movies that we know, and they kind of like went a little bit more extreme with it, and they're really, really good. I would recommend a few of those since you haven't seen them.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. You said Hammer horror?
Hammer horror film. Yeah, there's like a whole 2 decades worth to go through. There's a lot of Dracula movies, a lot of Frankenstein, stuff of that. Yeah, you'll probably recognize a lot of the actors because a lot of those actors from those movies transitioned into mainstream Hollywood films.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I definitely want it to be a real big mix of stuff because there's so much classic horror movies I haven't seen, and there's just so many like major franchises I haven't seen. Like I haven't seen any movie that involves Jason, Freddy, Leatherface. I haven't seen any of it. So I definitely actively, I haven't seen any of the Exorcist sequels. There's just a lot of that. I'm actively trying to improve on this season for sure.
Okay, so I'm going to recommend 2 of those because you said you haven't seen them, but because you know who Freddy is, you know who Jason is, I'm not going to recommend the first ones. I'm going to recommend Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors, which is considered
that one is on the list.
Okay, and I think it's Friday the 13th, Part 6. Jason Lives.
Oh, Jason.
That one is more. It's more like in the campier version of horror. Like horror, like the way Jason comes back in this is really ridiculous. Like it's definitely up there with like the more lighthearted horror.
Noted. Yeah, it's yeah, I've been really wanting to watch at least minimum like 1 or 2 movies from each of those major franchises.
Okay. Yeah, and if you're gonna watch a Universal horror movie, I would recommend Bride of Frankenstein. That's the best one of the bunch.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that. Yes.
Yeah.
I also I watched this. What's his name? Patton Oswalt, when he hosted some kind of horror festival.
Okay.
Somewhere, sometime, like whenever. Anyway, but when he hosted it, he did an introduction to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the first one, and they filmed and they showed it again. And he talked about how this movie is actually low key a comedy. And I was like, really? Explain. And so Patton Oswalt in this introduction, so in this intro, he shows like one scene in particular, one very iconic scene. It's just like pretty much Leatherface like finding a body, trying to move a body, something happens, and he's like trying to figure out like what he should do, and you're just like watching him react essentially. And it has like dramatic music and everything. And he's like, what if I told you? And he remutes the music. We're going to put a laugh track on this instead. And it plays very much like a physical comedy. And he compared it to like a Charlie Chaplin comedy. And it was really, and I was like, and now again, I have not seen the movie, but watching this little scene that he did with the laugh track and combination with his introduction and he showed a scene from like the silent movie era comedy with Charlie Chaplin and everything where I was so physical like that, and I was like, oh my gosh, is he selling me on Texas Chainsaw Massacre being a comedy?
Is this available? Watch this.
I saw it on YouTube a long time ago. I hope it's still there, but I was completely floored, and the way he talked about it, and it made complete sense.
Yeah, that is another one you should add on your list is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That movie is the reason why it's classic, and it's pre-Halloween too. Like everyone considers Halloween like The Godfather. Texas Chainsaw Massacre actually is.
Is that the one I'm thinking about that came out in like 73 or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, based loosely based on the story of Ed Gein, who would kill his he would skin his victims and wear their skin and stuff like that. And he had.
I'm aware.
I'm
aware of that one. Yeah, I'm aware. Yeah.
Yeah.
He supposedly killed potentially up to 60 people, but actually he didn't actually kill that many people. He killed maybe 20 people, but he actually had a hookup with a local graveyard. You feel me?
Yeah.
He had a hookup with the local graveyard where he would like slip in some money to like the groundskeeper and steal bodies. He would steal the bodies and skin them and like have just like make it into lampshades. He had like a belt made of nipples.
Yeah, that's the one that freaked me out.
He had yeah, no, I mean like there's you can pull it up. It's like literally a belt made of nipples. Like
there's pictures of it. I think
people nipples. It's really gross. That there's scalps. So if he wanted to put on he just woke up one day and he's like, you know what, I want a head of red hair.
Yeah.
He had it handy. That he had like gloves made of like actual skin hand, like gloved hands.
His soup bowls were people's skulls.
Yeah.
His lampshade was human skin.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I heard that he had furniture made of people's bones too.
I don't remember that. It's
Yeah, I might be
he was
mistaken.
also a hoarder. He had a
Mhm.
lot of mama issues.
Which
Okay,
is
he was
where
like
Norman Bates came from.
yes. He was apparently he had a older sibling, but his mom was like very religious and made him feel like he couldn't do anything. God was out to get him. Whole bunch of stuff, and he hated everyone.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a story. Like I know
rough.
they made a like I would believe it was a direct to video one about 20 years ago on him. That's someone I'm surprised they haven't done an actual theatrical movie on.
I'm kind of glad, to be honest, because there's, especially when it's based off true events, I wouldn't want it to be, unless it's, I'd be scared it would be glorifying his
Okay.
figure. Because there's a lot of movies and detective thrillers and everything that can be argued that they almost do glorify this killer. Like if you talk about the show Mindhunters, I love that show. It's really great. But apparently
it's based on
yes, like based on true people, Son of Sam, real killers and everything.
Yeah.
But also, apparently, there after that show, the show debuted, a lot of the serial killers that they were based on, real life based on, they suddenly became super duper popular again, and they started getting more fan mail, more mail from what is it? The like women that like send love letters to serial killers people in jail.
Well, not groupies, something like that.
Yeah, I can't remember what it's called. There's an official word for it, but they fall in love with these serial killers, that kind of thing. They apparently became so popular again as a result of that show in particular.
Okay, fair enough. That's actually not something I ever thought of about the glorification. Mm-hmm. I mean, like best example of that would be the Ted Bundy movie that came out last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very, if you're going to do it, you got to just be really, really careful about it, and be careful not just glamorize it or romanticize it. It's just such a weird, you just have to be so careful. And let's say, even if it was someone like David Fincher, who could really go into the darkness of these characters, which I would love to see him do, but I would just rather see him do a story inspired by it, because I don't want them to get more famous. I don't know.
I guess it's a good thing we have movies like Psycho, and we have movies like This Just Chainsaw Massacre, because they did draw their inspiration from Ed Gein. So that makes perfect. You definitely don't want to glorify any of that.
Yeah, it's weird.
And then I will recommend the Evil Dead movies. Those are fun.
Have you seen those?
Okay, a few months ago, like last month, I argued. Are you guys familiar with the Team Action?
Yeah.
Like with like the boys, they have like they have the action guys. They have every other Thursday they have this show called the Generals Debate, and I'm a general. Yeah. So the Generals Debate, where based off the topic that they pick, you pick some topic. So one of them was like best fictional president and movie history. Another one was the one I debated on was best trilogy of all time. And I ended up going with the Before trilogy. But another one I really wanted to do was the Evil Dead trilogy.
Yes.
However, they told me I couldn't pick it because technically that would have to include, it wouldn't count because there is the 2013 reboot.
Yeah, that one is that's a hairy thing, because yes, you have at the very end, but yeah, it's a strange one.
Yeah, but I love that franchise so much.
So that movie, the remake. So when I came back to where I'm living now for my friend's wedding, I brought that movie with me because none of my friends had ever seen it. And so instead of watching the movie while they were watching it, I was watching them, and the hysterics they were going into when she ripped off her hanks, was caught under the Jeep, or when that whole third act in blood, I was enjoying them more than I was the movie.
Yeah. It's so funny. It's I watched it for the first time earlier this year. I just marathoned that over a Saturday, and I was just so I loved it so much. I was surprised at how much genuine laughter.
Oh yeah.
Like I was told it was funny, but I never really realized. I didn't really know anything about it, like in full depth. But I was just like, this is just so great. And also unintentionally, I watched like a week before. I watched Cabin in the Woods. Not really planning to watch it. I'm planning to watch the movies, but then Lucas had me watch them, and I was like, "Oh, this is wonderful."
I've always wanted to get a hold of that coffee mug that turns into the bong.
Oh, yeah.
That was like.
Apparently, that was Drew Goddard. He mentioned it in an interview that coffee mug was the most expensive prop that they had because they had to have it made specifically. They had to get so many, and each of them cost like $20,000 or $30,000 or something in order to make because like the physics behind making it was like crazy. So
that's insane. It's always the small stuff.
Yeah, but I guess they were like, yeah, we got to have it. Oh, we got to get a thermos bonk thing.
Oh, man, that was for me was the highlight of the film. I was like, well, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So as we're wrapping up, is there a movie in particular that you are excited to see for the first time this month?
Psycho, probably.
Right on. I actually just watched that for the first time myself too.
Yeah, I've seen clips from it, but I have never seen it in full.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, who doesn't know the ending? It's pretty darn iconic, but similar to Halloween and everything, I'm pretty excited to see a movie has become so influential.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh, right on. Ben, is there any particular horror movie that you're going to watch this month that you're probably, I don't know, is this one that you've seen a lot or maybe one you haven't seen?
I'm still thinking about it. I don't have one on the top of my head right now.
I'm leaning towards checking out Silence of the Lambs again. I think it's time. It's been almost 20 years.
That's pretty solid.
Yeah.
If you haven't had the chance to see it, have you seen the movie Trick or Treat?
Yes, I have it back there, yeah.
Ben, have you seen it?
No.
Trick or Treat takes place over the one night of Halloween in this small wherever town, and it's so great. Oh my gosh. And it's like almost like an anthology kind of situation where it's like there's like 6 stories that kind of all take place. Like Brian Cox is in it, Anna Paquin is in it. There's like a lot of people that's in it, and it's not, and they're all kind of weave into each other in some way, but it's really, really good. It's by the same director that did Sinister, I think.
Okay.
I have to double check. I'm failing. Why do I know this? He also did Krampus.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I know. I forget his name. I know who you mean.
It's so good. It's so good. Yeah, Dylan Baker. Oh, that guy freaks me out. No, I'm totally wrong. Michael Dougherty. He did it. He did Krampus. He did X-Men Apocalypse. But yeah, he did a bunch of stuff. So
yeah.
Candyman.
Oh god, yeah. First time a few years ago. That movie is awesome.
That movie is so good.
Yeah,
so good.
I think to love that so much. And if there is one of the a horror remake that I recommend the Friday the 13th horror remake. That is actually, in my opinion, that is the best of the remake of those franchises. I would definitely check that out.
Is that the one with Jessica Biel?
No, that's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Friday the 13th has Jared Padalecki in it.
I don't. Oh, okay. I know what you're talking about. Okay, from Supernatural.
Yeah, and Danielle Panabaker from The Flash.
Oh, really?
I believe she's in that one too. Yeah, definitely. It's a solid remake, and it's kind of like the greatest hits of the Friday the 13th kills in that movie. So
nice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, so where can everybody find you, Alex?
You can find me right here on Twitter at @real_AlexMack. You can also find me at a few other places, such as the Call to Action podcast, everywhere podcasts are found, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, all that fun stuff. That'd be real cool if you could definitely check us out. And I host a show called Schmobates where we debate all things Schmodown. It happens on Wednesdays. Next Wednesday, we're going to be diving into the quirky mercs. So it's going to be a fun time. Cinema Bias is a show where Drew and I really dive into our personal movie biases, movies that really challenge us, watch that are wheelhouse. We watched very recently To Catch a Thief. Drew has never seen that movie. She does not watch Hitchcock movies, so we dive into why. So it's fun.
Okay, and Ben, what about you?
You can find me at Ben Radio 2. And I'm all over the place. Facebook, Twitter, and I think that's it.
And you could find me with this gentleman that way on Sundays on the show Get Sweaty. You could also find me on the Schmoes of the North YouTube channel with my fellow Canucks, where we break down the week in Schmoedown. We interview people from within the community itself. And you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at soda_the_saxman. Alex, thank you very much for joining with us today. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed talking horror movies with you.
Thank you for having me. It was fun to get several really awesome recommendations.
Yeah, it's same here. I really want to check out that movie Audition. I think that's another one I'll check out this month.
You've been warned.
Sounds good. And with that, thank you for joining us on Shooting the Breeze, everybody. Have a good evening.
Yeah, thank you.